My name is Lee Kim, and I am with Martin Chow, and today we're going to talk about the roles, duties, and responsibilities of the Central Tibetan Administration. Before that, I refer to the Charter of the Tibetan in Exile 1991, and I read you the first paragraph. His Holiness the Dalai Lama has guided us towards a democratic system of government in order that the Tibetan people in exile be able to preserve their ancient traditions of spiritual and temporal life, unique to the Tibetans, based on the principles of peace and non-violence, aimed at providing political, social, and economic rights, as well as the attainment of justice and equality for all Tibetan people. On that note, we all know that on November 14, 2016, this new documentary was released. Shugden Protesters, Allegations versus Facts. Martin, I know that you've studied this issue at great depth and at great length. What do you think is wrong with this video?
Well, Lee Kim, the video is one that is created by the Department of Information and International Relations, which is a part of the Central Tibetan Administration. What I find amazing is that this is a video that is created by a so-called government to purposely demonize and to attack one religion. So on the one hand, you have the Central Tibetan Administration claiming to be a democracy. On the other hand, this video itself says that they are not. You see, why would a government, any government which is a democratic government, go and make one video with no other purpose than to disparage and to undermine the credibility of one single religion?
Martin, you had mentioned that what is wrong with this video is the fact that they singled out one religion and they zoned in on it and made a 13-minute long documentary. Now, in any government, it's run by people who should comply with constitution, rules, bylaws, whatever you want to call it. Now, this video, the production of this video, what does it say about the people in power or the people with authority behind CTA?
Well, it says very clearly that on the one hand, that the Central Tibetan Administration presents itself to the world as a democracy. It tells the people that it is a democracy, that it appreciates and it upholds freedom, and which is why the world should support its struggle to regain its country. And it frames itself as if it is a victim of an oppressive communist regime. So the CTA on the one hand says, look, you know, we are for freedom, we are for liberty, we are for human rights and all that. But this video is actually proof that the CTA has no intentions to be a democracy and is not a democracy, because in a democracy, the government does not single out one religion to persecute its adherents.
How is this taking place? I mean, this video, fine, well, you know, is done. It says what it wants to say. It promotes His Holiness the Dalai Lama, and it puts down Shugden practitioners.
Well, it shouldn't. But that's precisely the point, because the CTA is supposed to be governed by the Constitution. The Constitution is supposed to be the highest law, which means every single person who regards himself as being a citizen or a member of this community, of this nation, must abide by the highest law, which is the Constitution. Now, the CTA's Constitution stipulates very clearly in Articles 9 and 10 that every single Tibetan has a right to his religion, has a right has freedom, basically. Okay, but we see that on the one hand, they tell you that you have freedom of religion. On the other hand, since 1996, the CTA, through its cabinet and parliament, has enacted no less than 4 official resolutions to criminalize, to target, and to demonize one religion, which is Dorje Shugden. Let me read out some of the things that they have resolved. In a cabinet resolution dated May 1996, it regarded the worship of Dorje Shugden as one of the greatest dangers to the cause of Tibet and the life of His Holiness the Dalai Lama. So there's no question whatsoever that this so-called democracy is saying you can have freedom of religion, but if you practice a religion that we don't like, we're going to frame it as such that you are endangering the life of His Holiness the Dalai Lama, which the Tibetan people regard as the God King. And anything that harms the Dalai Lama is, of course, regarded as something to oppose. That puts the people who worship Dorje Shugden pretty much as enemy number one of the Tibetan people.
But like you said, it's supposed to be a democratic government with a constitution that protects the Tibetan people's freedom and sets out their rights. Yet, there seems to be so much contradiction in their actions versus what's documented in their constitution.
It is a very dangerous contradiction because where governments, real democratic governments, use state instruments to protect the people, to uphold their rights, we see very clearly, and this is not our evidence, this is procured from the CTA's official website. This is proof that the CTA is using state instruments to persecute certain people that they don't like. And they're persecuting these people based on religion. So what are we to believe? Do the people have freedom of religion, which means that your constitution is correct, is that you are taking your constitution seriously? Or are you saying we have a constitution, but the CTA is going to go ahead and trample all over it? What does that mean? It means that the CTA does not respect its own laws. And if you don't respect your own laws that protect the people, it says that it has no intention to protect the people. So how is it a democracy? How is it different to other oppressive regimes?
You mentioned earlier that the CTA uses state instruments for persecution. How else does the CTA abuse its authority?
It's very clearly, Kim. The CTA has a constitution. Therefore, everything which is part of the state machinery should act to preserve and uphold the constitution. But instead, we have very clear examples. In 1996, the cabinet declared, and I quote, propitiating Dorgyal, which is a derogatory name for Dorje Shugden, does great harm to the cause of Tibet. It also imperils the life of the Dalai Lama. Therefore, it is totally inappropriate for the great monasteries of the Gelug tradition, the upper and lower tantric monasteries, and all other affiliated monasteries, which are national institutions, ever to propitiate Dorgyal. Here you have politicians telling monasteries what they can pray to, what they can't, what is appropriate, what is not. It is a very clear case of interference by the government into religious affairs. Another example, the Parliament declared, further recognizes also the Dorgyal followers and others who have caused grave harm to the faith and polity of Tibet under the Chinese government's ploy and in violation of the law of karma as criminals in history. Now this is loaded. In one sentence, they are saying that Shugden people are in fact traitors. In the same sentence, they're declaring how, by worshipping this 400-year-old deity, that you have broken the laws of karma. So now the CTA becomes a judge of what is and what isn't good and bad karma. This is not the role of a government. And further finally declares that if you are a Shugden practitioner, you are a criminal. Even though you have nothing to do with the CTA, you're not under the CTA's purview. You could be in a country like Malaysia, minding your own business. Merely by minding your own business, you can be declared a criminal, and this is the most dangerous of all. And they declare, the government, non-governmental organizations, and individuals, which means everyone, should continue to follow His Holiness the Dalai Lama's advice on the demerit of Shugden practice, the resolutions of the Assembly of Tibetan People's Deputies and the Tibetan administrative organs' instructions on the matter, and they should challenge the nefarious designs of the Shugden activists and should not let their guard down. This is the CTA telling people, giving the instructions that you should go out and challenge anyone who practices Dorje Shugden. it cannot be more clear than this, that rather than using their authority and power to protect Tibetans, to uphold the law, to maintain or to create unity and harmony, they're using their power to create division, and they're telling one group of Tibetans to go attack another group. Now, you have this, which is from the Department of Religion and Culture. And when you look at the CTA's charter, the Department of Religion and Culture is supposed to promote and to preserve all religious traditions of Tibet. But this one says is a directive from the Department of Culture or Department of Religion and Culture, barring the issuance of travel recommendation letters to Dorje Shugden practitioners. Now, this directly flies in the face of what Sikyong Lobsang Sangye says, that everybody has the right to apply for papers to travel. This is proof that that's not true.
Correct.
That on paper they are, but if you are not issued with these recommendation papers, you just don't get your travel papers. And here's another from the Tibetan government's Department of Health, okay, issuing a directive to its employees to give up Dorje Shugden's practice or resign. So they're saying, okay, you have freedom of religion, but if you worship a religion that we oppose, we're going to use our state instrument to kick you out of your job. And you can't get jobs everywhere. And you can't travel. Again, we see that the Sikyong Lobsang Sangye has deceived the people when he said that there's no discrimination and they have equal rights.
Enlightening. In fact, dangerously enlightening. Because knowing what you have just shared with us, the CTA is actually the mastermind behind the ban and all the discrimination resulting from the ban. Would you say that?
The CTA is definitely the driving force behind the ban. The ban started with these resolutions. The ban has been preserved and has been reinforced with ongoing resolutions. The government incited the people against Shugden practitioners by these decrees. This evidence is proof that what the Sikyong said, what this video, the information contained in this video, is wrong. It is willfully wrong and deceptive.
But there are people who say that the CTA is not behind this, is not behind the ban, is not behind all the discrimination against the Shugden practitioners, but the people, the anti-Dorje Shugden people who are independently acting, you know, and in fact, they are calling Shugden practitioners as fundamentalist cults that are violent people. What do you say to that?
As to your question, as to the suggestion that the CTA is not behind this, but the people are, well, these decrees indicate that that's not true. In fact, I would say that the CTA created a situation where the people are obliged to follow. So if it is the people who are now saying, well, you know, we have to reject the Shugden people, we have to oppose them, we have to challenge them, well, they are doing so in obedience to the law, a very, very bad and harmful law that the CTA passed. That's number one. Number two, if for whatever reason the CTA says, well, we actually didn't know that all these things were happening. There's been 20 years of opportunities for the CTA and its members to go to the public, to engage with Shugden people, to find a resolution, and to create dialogue, and to create reunification between Shugden and non-Shugden people. They had every opportunity to do that. Not once has the CTA gone out and then says, look, Tibetans, whether we like the Shugden people or not, they have a right, so leave them alone. That's never been the case.
Right.
Now, instead of the politicians engaging with people towards peaceful resolution, we had situations where Lobsang Sangye and Pampa Sering as the speaker going to even schools, Tibetan schools, to poison the minds of young Tibetans. So these are the future of the Tibetan people. These school boys and girls will grow up to become leaders, of the Tibetan people. What are you implanting in their minds? You're telling them it is okay to discriminate against others. It is okay to divide. It is okay to persecute people based on religion. What kind of a government would go to schools to poison the minds of people against a religion they don't like, and then say they are a democracy and celebrate Democracy Day every single year? I don't get it.
Something is really not quite right, right?
Something's not quite right, and rather than correcting it, you see the CTA doing things like this over and over again to reinforce the mistake. Look, assuming a mistake had been made, they could just let it slide. They could just very gently and quietly not talk about it anymore. But here you are, November 14, 2016. 20 years later after this, they are still saying the same things. What is the message of this? Shugden people are bad. Why would a government of a democracy do this?
That is a very, very good question that maybe perhaps only they can answer. Maybe they know their own agenda. Now, I hear what you're saying. However, there is one incident that can make the CTA right. And that would be the triple murder in 1997 of Losang Gyatso, the director of Institute of Buddhist Dialectics. Now, what is your view on that?
Okay, just a bit of history. There was this triple murder of the director of Buddhist Dialectics in 1997, if I'm not mistaken, and two of his assistants. The murders were pinned on Shugden practitioners. Now, this is assuming that it is true that the people who committed these crimes were Shugden practitioners. Why would you tarnish an entire religion? If I were to go to the prisons in any country, I would find convicted criminals who are of different religions. I would find inmates who are Muslims, who are Buddhists, who are Taoists, who are atheists, who are Catholics, so on and so forth, and who are Hindu. Okay, does it mean that all religions are bad? It doesn't. The worship of Dorje Shugden has nothing to do with his murders. There is nothing in the ritual of Dorje Shugden that requires anyone to murder. If there were, there'd be murders everywhere, not just one triple murder in 1997 in a 400-year-old history. It is extremely dangerous for the government to criminalize an entire religion, worshipped by 4 million people around the world, on one case, which, by the way, has not been resolved.
All right. So I've read of the famous hit list that CTA published. Okay. Don't you think that is another act that is like, here you go, here is the names and the faces? Is it again a form of provoking people to act? And act violently or act on their own yet legally?
The hit list you're referring to is part of the protest that this video alluded to. That there were protests against the Dalai Lama, seeking the Dalai Lama to remove the ban on Dorje Shugden. These protests, as I understand it, took place in a number of locations and were approved by the local governments, because in any democracy, a lawful protest is allowed. So, but instead of allowing a protest, which is very, very common in all democracies, what the CTA has done is to identify people who participated in the protest, put the names and identities on the list, which is the hit list that you're referring to, and in that way, encouraging people to just go get them. Because remember earlier, the CTA says it is almost like the duty of every Tibetan to challenge and oppose these people. Now they have told the Tibetans, these are the people you should challenge. Mm-hmm. So why would a democratic country do that? You see protests everywhere in the newspaper. You don't see the government, creating a hit list and telling people, these are the people who protested. These are the people who disagree with us. Go get them.
Right. I thank you for your time, Martin, and a very clear and very deep insight into this governance of the CTA. When there is discord in a community which causes physical harm to its people, and instead of resolution, there is blame, one has to look at governance. Why is it tolerated for some groups to act against the Constitution? Who is closing an eye? By not taking action to resolve the discord and disharmony, is the CTA inciting separation among its people? And that is the question you need to answer.